But as you know, and in science, correlations do not indicate cause and effect. You have to be extremely dangerous. When I taught a science credit for art students, I spent a whole lecture talking about this danger of cause and effect and correlation. And one of my favorite ones was that Diet Coke causes obesity. Because if you do a scientific study, you find that more people that are obese drink Diet Coke than any other group. Therefore, it's the Diet Coke that's causing the obesity. Well, we knew that there was this relationship, correlation, I should say, between sunspots and temperature, but we didn't have the cause and effect mechanism. So the IPCC quite correctly argued, well, we ignore that. We're not going to look at that. They also ignored it, of course, because they argued that humans they don't contribute to what the sun is doing. We have no part in that, so they could ignore it based upon their definition. But what happened was in 1991, a couple of scientists by the name of I've got to get them correct, Christiansen and it doesn't matter, but Christiansen was one of them. And then he joined later with a guy by the name of Heinrich Svensmark. And Svensmark in 1992 came out with what's called the Svensmark theory or the cosmic theory. And he came up with the mechanism that explains the relationship with sunspots and global temperature. What the sunspots are manifestations of changes in the whole activity within the sun, and it particularly manifests in changes in the strength of the sun's magnetic field. Now, the sun's magnetic field strength controls the amount of cosmic radiation coming from deep space and arriving on Earth. Those particles of cosmic radiation, as they pass through the atmosphere, in the lower atmosphere become what are called condensation nuclei. That is, they become little particles that are necessary for water vapor, a gas, to condense onto to become a water droplet. Now, a water droplet is extremely small. That's what the clouds are made up of, water droplets. But there are billions of them in a cloud. That's why you can see the cloud. To give you an idea of how small a water droplet is, it takes approximately 1 million of them to get together to form a medium-sized raindrop. Okay? So one of the things that we knew was that there was more cloud than there were condensation nuclei, that is, these little particles around which the water vapor could condense. The ones that we knew about in the atmosphere were clay particles coming from the surface of the Earth, but also salt particles. We knew about those, but there weren't enough of them in the atmosphere to explain the amount of cloud that was being created. Well, the Svensmark theory then explained that, and what he showed was that as the number of sunspots, which were just a manifestation of changes on the sun, as the sun's magnetic field changed, that controlled the amount of low cloud cover in the Earth's atmosphere. The low cloud cover, of course, then determined how much of the heat from the sun reached the surface of the Earth, which, of course, controls the global temperature. That has been in the literature since 1992, the cosmic theory, but it's not even mentioned in the IPCC reports. Those solar cycles are tracked back. We started the first cycle. It's called the Wolf number. It starts in 1747. Galileo was the first to plot sunspot numbers, and that was in 1610. So we know the variability of sunspot numbers. So from that, the solar cycles are created. There's an 11-year sunspot number, and then there's a 22-year sunspot number, and the 22-year sunspot number is the one that really controls the temperature. And so the Soviets, and now the Russian climatologists and the Chinese climatologists, are the ones that are saying that as the sunspot numbers decrease, and by the way, they were increasing up to 1990. They've been decreasing ever since. That is why the global temperature has been decreasing since 2000. And it's been causing all the problems for the IPCC. And that's why we're predicting, and I agree with them, that I would say with 97% certainty that we're heading into a cooling phase because the sunspot numbers are decreasing. This year, we're in sunspot cycle number 25. Starting, as I said, in 1747. The sunspot numbers are as low as they were in 1800, which was a period called the Dalton minimum, and we had very cold temperatures around the world at that time. That is almost for certain where we're headed. We're heading into global cooling. And what's so frustrating about this is because of their single-mindedness and their deliberate single-mindedness, the government are preparing us for warming when cooling is a much greater threat. And all you have to do is go and read the CIA reports from the 1970s to understand why cooling is a much greater threat.
That's interesting. I think we're going to see more about this in the future. I hope more people will pick up on it and write about it and just put it out there for the public to consume. Although, as you mentioned, the public is not really, they're not really caught up in the global warming thing anyway, but I wouldn't, they might not even be caught up in the global cooling thing if they learned about that. But certainly as a political structure, the United Nations is coming under increasing scrutiny and skepticism amongst the public. Unfortunately, as you kind of alluded to, the public really doesn't have a lot of control over what happens within this organization, and they can't really be causative in any way because it's the leaders of their countries that are actually doing this. So,
there's a very interesting, sorry, but there's a very interesting point with that because I took seniors on tours of Europe and took them to Pompeii on 3 different occasions. On one of the trips, we just went and looked at graffiti in Pompeii. And after the eruption of Vesuvius in 74 BC or AD, they were having an election at the time. One of the pieces of graffiti in Pompeii says, if we get rid of this bunch of scoundrels, we just get another bunch of scoundrels. And so the public know that it doesn't make any difference if you change leadership. You just get people that have personal political agendas. The only time, and I've spent a great career looking at what causes political change in response to when do the public finally say, as Popeye said, that's all I can stand no more. There's 2 factors. One is that 2 factors that cause political change. The first one is when there's a failure of the food supply. One of the great myths that's been created by the Obama administration was the Arab Spring. And they pointed at Egypt and said, oh, it's democracy breaking out in the Middle East. It was not at all. The riots in Egypt were totally about the increasing cost of food. And why was that occurring? It was occurring because the governments were subsidizing ethanol production from corn, which pushed the price of corn up, which made the basic food supply for the poor people go up around the world. That's what caused the riots in Egypt. It had nothing to do with democracy. Those are countries that have no democracy at any level. So that's what triggered the French Revolution. They had 2 consecutive years of harvest failure. The first year, the price of a loaf of bread went up to 55% of a peasant family's total income, just for 1 loaf of bread. And then the second year of harvest failure, they were 87% of their income went just to get bread. The third year, of course, they said, that's enough. We've got to get rid of the government. They storm the Bastille and the French Revolution begins. It, of course, was a total disaster because they just ended up with more of the same. The other thing that causes people to revolt against their leadership is when the leaders forget that they only are there at the will of the people. So even in monarchies and dictatorships, if the leaders start to put out the word that the people have no control over anything, that they are there by, for example, the divine right, as Charles I said. And what did they do? We'll show you divine right. We'll cut your head off. And what did Louis XVI say? L'état c'est moi. I am the state. Okay, Louis, here's your head on a platter. And of course, when you look at what's going on with Obama and what's going on with governments around, the Canadian government, the new Liberal government, oh, we know what's best for you. We are here to save you from yourselves. You're too stupid. And of course, at that point, people start to rise up. So those are the only two things where the people will actually push to change the government. The rest of the time, they simply try to adapt and survive. And hopefully, they'll come to their senses with what's going on in Paris.
Yes, we can hope for a better outcome, but we'll see. We don't have long to wait either. Well, our time is up for this interview, Dr. Ball. I just so greatly appreciate you taking the time and, in a sense, giving us a college lecture here on this stuff. This is absolutely fantastic stuff. No, these are things that we don't hear. We don't, you can, life doesn't live on a bumper sticker, where you just have 3 words or something to say about something. And there is background to everything. And you've been there, you've done it, you've lived it, you've experienced it, you interacted with a lot of these people, and hearing your perspective on all of these things is I think it's really important for people to understand. There are still people who care about history a little bit and who care about the more detailed look. I'm one of them, I think, but I wish there was more, for sure. I'm sure you've run across that, but listen, I hope we can leave the door open to do additional interviews in the future as these things unfold, as the climate change issue unfolds in the next year. I've got a feeling that there will be some very interesting turns and twists that will maybe surprise us. And so there will be more to talk about, I think, in the future.
Yeah. Just to pick up on that last point, to tie this back in with what we started out with, bumper stickers are, for the average person, the modern philosophy. One of the things that the environmental movement, they were pushing was, well, we got to get rid of the people. The bumper sticker came out and said, save the planet, kill yourself. It succinctly summarizes the whole situation. But what they did through the United Nations Environment Program and Maurice Strong, they created bumper sticker slogans. You mentioned one of them, sustainable development. That term came out of a commission produced or put forward and created by the Club of Rome, chaired by Gro Harlem Brundtland, who was the socialist prime minister of Norway. And she coined that, her commission coined that term, sustainable development. It's the perfect political term because, as I've said, it means everything to everyone and nothing to anyone. And it's just like any of these things. When you start to think about it and parse it, you suddenly realize, well, what are they really saying here? That came to my understanding when I was asked to do a study on sustainable agriculture. Then I said, well, sustainable agriculture makes sense because now I've got the noun agriculture and I've got the adjective sustainable. I can identify that. But in sustainable development, development and sustainable are both adjectives. It's a meaningless phrase. And not only that, but development means constant growth, which in the human body is cancer. And you can't sustain constant growth. So the term is an oxymoron.
Yes,
if you turn it around and say we need to develop a sustainable society, then it makes some sense. But they didn't want that. They wanted a catchphrase that would, as I said, mean everything to everyone and nothing to anyone. And so they're the bumper stickers of the whole environmental movement.
Yes, indeed. And I have one bumper sticker of my own to totally confuse them. And that is the concept of sustainable liberty. And
yes.
So we can hope for that in the future. Well, Dr. Ball, we will talk again in the future, I'm sure. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I hope that you can continue to have a great impact up in Canada and around the world, for that matter, too. You already have, and keep up the good work.